CBS News has learned that the Boston Coast Guard is operating a search and rescue mission for a missing submarine.
The sub was exploring the wreckage of the Titanic. The sub went missing in the Atlantic Ocean near Canada.
This is the Titan submersible. It's 6.7 metres or 22 feet long. Its hull is made out of carbon fibre and titanium, and it weighs nearly 10.5 tonnes, about the same as 6 cars, which according to its operator OceanGate means it's lighter and cheaper to run than any other deep water sub.
Roxana, good morning. This is so terrifying because the clock is really ticking here.
The 5 people on board, a British billionaire, a French diving expert, a Pakistani businessman and his son, and the founder of the sub-company OceanGate Expeditions, Stockton Rush.
It has become essentially normal to dump on the wealthy and rich online. No, let me rephrase that. It has become normal to dump on those rich people who choose not to spend their time cosplaying as social justice advocates. We love it when wealthy people convincingly present themselves as understanding the plight of the everyday person. That's why online, these advocates, not by any stretch of the imagination, make about 10 times more than your average landlord, yet are in nowhere near as hated by audiences. There's no such thing as a good landlord, because a landlord is basically making money very overtly off the poor. But there's definitely such a thing as a good commentator, for instance, even though they're making a lot more than a landlord, because they are telling the poor exactly what they want to hear. And so them making money off the poor is not such a big deal. It isn't as overt. And so in all this, presentation is everything, and substance is nothing. Because substance is complicated, it's nuanced, it makes you question your firmly held beliefs. It makes you have to acknowledge that you are not always right. You oftentimes have to concede defeat on your most strongly held beliefs. And I would argue that one of these beliefs is that billionaires are essentially our modern day cockroach. They are absolutely hated. And although they aren't everywhere, their publicity, their influence, and their audacity makes it appear as if they are. Former CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, said that he prefers to be called a person of means because of the pejorative connotations associated with being labeled a billionaire. The term encapsulates everything from growing income inequality, wage stagnation, the cost of living crisis, a dystopian future in which AI and post-human technology saves the few and not the many. 81 billionaires have more money than 50% of the entire world combined. And for the first time in 25 years, the divide between the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor has increased to such an extent that the World Bank has actually declared that it in fact won't be able to, we as a world will not be able to eradicate extreme poverty by 2030 as projected. The world's 5 most hated billionaires, according to AI data collection, are pretty well-known villains in their own right. And what makes them villains overall, in my opinion, is their failure to acquiesce to fairness. That is, advocating for fairness, for a better world, for the abolition of capitalism or what have you, is definitely not on their agenda. They typically perceive themselves as innovators and superhuman individuals. And there's clear, justifiable resentment in the realization that the rich are getting richer, that corporations are increasing their profits year after year, that the system that is so upheld and glorified by the wealthy is essentially rigged against everybody else. And on top of all that, the middle class and middle class aspirations for lower classes are rapidly being eroded. The modern working classes have really, well and truly been forgotten as a lost cause, especially as their jobs are increasingly taken overseas or taken over by technology. However, I think a profound issue arises when this resentment replaces our humanity. And yes, arguably the most hated billionaires don't think of people as people in a world that is only fit for conquering in their eyes. But that ought not to mean that, in response, we lose our humanity when it comes to treating individual people, of which billionaires are too, as individual people. What I see online is this affording of humanity to wealthy wealthy, rich people and to billionaires that we like, but not to wealthy people and billionaires who we don't like for whatever reason. What has become clear since Sunday is that people have really jumped on the bandwagon of really detesting billionaires whom only 3-4 days ago they had never heard about. One of these men is Stockton Rush. And that brings me to the latest instance of dehumanizing 5 billionaires. Hamish Harding, Shahzada Dawood, Sulman Dawood, Paul Henry Nargeolet, and Stockton Rush. Hamish Harding, a British-born adventurer and explorer, holds 3 Guinness World Records for his feats. One of his records is for the longest time spent at full ocean depth into the deepest part of the Mariana Trench in the Hadal zone. When he was asked about his appetite for exploration, he reportedly said that, and I quote, "My view is that these are all calculated risks and are well understood before we start," end quote. Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son, Sulman, are both members of one of Pakistan's richest families. Shahzada is vice chairman of Engro Corporation, a Pakistani conglomerate and fertilizer firm. He's spoken on agriculture and fertility at the United Nations, looking into ways that science and technology can improve the lives of women in particular. He also works with a Californian-based institution, the ACTI Institute, which conducts research into searching for extraterrestrial life. Dawood's son, Sulman, has been described by his family as being, and I quote, "a big fan of science fiction literature, learning and exploring new things, and playing volleyball," end quote. Paul Henry Nargeolet is a retired French Navy diver who was a part of the first expedition ever to explore the Titanic wreckage in 1987. He is a director of underwater research for a company that owns the rights to underwater exploration of the Titanic wreck. He spent more time underwater exploring the wreckage than perhaps anybody on Earth, and it is believed that his military history and, according to his family, composure will hopefully be reassuring and helping everybody on board through this horrifying ordeal. Stockton Rush is an experimental engineer and the founder and CEO of OceanGate. He's a bona fide risk taker, and his risk taking has raised a lot of questions online about the value of human life in relation to risk. It's hard to reconcile the rush of rescue efforts to find billionaires who've paid £250,000 to see the Titanic, and the stunning lack of rush to save refugees fleeing war and famine. 600 poor people missing in Greece, but they care only for 5 rich idiots. Imagine if the human race tried to rescue 750 people in danger at sea with as much enthusiasm as it tries to save 5. To be clear, both should be saved, of course, but the difference in response is stark. Why? There is no good answer. 6 days ago, a super yacht costing about $175 million was sailing in the Mediterranean. This super yacht is owned by a Mexican silver magnate, and on a fateful night, this boat came into contact with people who it never does. The super yacht, Mayan Queen IV, was sailing smoothly in clear water through the dark and calm Mediterranean in the early hours of June 14th, when it received a call about a migrant ship in distress 4 nautical miles away. This super yacht did what the Greek Coast Guard is currently being investigated for failing miserably to do: saving desperate migrants stuck at sea. Instead of catering to the pleasures of billionaires and their friends across Monaco and Italy, this boat saved 100 migrants who sadly were the very few who have survived this terrible tragedy and ordeal. 82 individuals have been classified as dead, but regrettably, it is likely that over 650 individuals, men, women, and children, have drowned. Sadly, this is nothing new, considering what has been happening with the migrant crisis on the Mediterranean for the last few years. Desperate Pakistanis, Palestinians, Syrians, and Egyptians have been fleeing and trying to seek out a better life, actually more so just a life in Europe. Why I mention this is because of the recent coverage, extensive coverage of what is currently happening in Canadian waters. Evidence has come out that Greek authorities authorities who were meant to respond to this particular trawler of migrants traveling across the Mediterranean persistently failed to help. The Greek authorities repeatedly decided not to assist a roughly 80 to 100 foot fishing trawler stuffed with as many as 750 people fleeing desperate poverty and the displacement of war in Greece's search and rescue area. Only when the ship sank in front of the Coast Guard did the authorities spur to action, calling on the Mayon Queen, one of the world's 100 largest yachts. Now, in this past fortnight, the world's oceans have really put a magnifying glass up to the inequalities of our current world order. And the value of risk is a very difficult conversation to have. Now, there's 2 points that I'd like to make about this. Firstly, people are trying to make a comparison between, on the one hand, these 5 individuals, 5 billionaires that are stuck in the OceanGate submersible, to the virtually non-existent rescue efforts made by the Greek Coast Guard to save 750 men, women and children. The poor people on the Titanic, the steerage, were locked in the holds so the rich people could escape first. There's irony in the rich people returning and then getting stuck in the graves of the poor. Now, this is very hard for me to say and to come to terms with because I completely understand and really within my soul have this burning rage about this comparison insofar as it is a stark instance of excruciating global inequality. However, I'll be frank, this is a terrible comparison to make, irrespective of how appealing it is. And I assure you it is incredibly appealing. Why this disparity? Writes Priyamvada Gupal in Al Jazeera. The crude, if dismaying answer is that ours is a world in which the lives of a few matter significantly more than the lives of the many, a disparity that intensifies along geopolitical, class, race and caste lines. The poor, the vulnerable and the victims of war, clinging to the sides of a rubber dinghy, are not mournable in the same way as the wealthy white man figured as an explorer or adventurer who goes to sea in an expensive, bespoke vessel. I would say that people saying this, although I think they come at it with the best of intentions, are really just feigning the moral high ground, or they just haven't thought about this more deeply and intrinsically, which I think is very important in this case. Which brings me to my second point, which is that it is so out of touch to compare two completely different and distinct instances to each other, insofar as then being able to say that we wish death upon these billionaires. I don't see what the point in comparing these two so directly to one another is, aside from trying to moralize to the masses, to disguise the fact that you and I can't do anything about either instance. There is only one commonality between the OceanGate expedition and migrants fleeing war and poverty. Both paid to embark on a risky voyage into the ocean. Risk out of desperation and risk for recreation are two starkly distinct and different things, which nobody, irrespective of why you have embarked on such a voyage, deserves to die. As grim as the situation is, it speaks plainly about the people who signed up for this. With all the evidence of the terrible cut corners and massive safety issues of the submarine, I find it hard to say it wasn't in some respect a death wish to go on this. To pay $250,000 on something and not even do the most basic research on it speaks to the carelessness with both their money and their own safety. And I think this quote is actually just testament to anybody who embarks on such a risky journey. Individuals, including parents, and I know that these parents from these countries are in real desperation. I think to put your children at such risk, to put your children into the hands of smugglers is just as petrifying to consider. In both instances, all individuals involved are victims front and center. That isn't, however, to say that they weren't careless. See, rich bastards always think rules don't apply to them, that rules and laws are for the same people. How has trying to defy the laws of physics working out for you? So many questions. Aren't rich people supposed to be smart? Who looks at this tin can and thinks, let me spend 8 days with total strangers at the bottom of the sea? Where do they go to the toilet, bathe, sleep? Imagine being a billionaire who's gotten everything you've ever wanted your entire life, and now you're trapped in here as the lights inevitably flicker out. out, and you're just sitting there in complete and total darkness as the realization sets in that no one is coming for you. Do you think they're fighting in there? I don't know why, but I imagine 4 angry billionaires are going to end up flipping out the second something doesn't go their way. It should happen more. This. Billionaires dying seems good to me. They don't do shit to help others and are the most greediest bastards 9 times out of 10. Personally, easy choice for me though. To be honest, I giggled when I found out one of the guys in the submarine was the CEO. I'm just sad about the kid and the diver. They don't deserve this to happen to them. The other 3 guys, I don't care if they die really. Rich people will do anything to avoid paying taxes. We should put all the rich people in these and force them to go through this. This would be fucking life-changing and hopefully humbling for everyone involved. And as I said, I understand the comparison between these 2 tragedies. I understand it on an emotive level, not on a logical level. Logically and reasonably, it's an absolutely terrible comparison to make, but emotionally it makes perfect sense. For instance, it's been confirmed that 209 Pakistanis have been lost at sea on this migrant vessel, whereas the efforts that are being made into trying to save the life of a Pakistani billionaire, really, the difference is noticeable. But is this how we make a fairer world? Is this how we, I don't know, theoretically redistribute wealth? Through resentment, through anger, through wishing death upon those we consider to be our enemies? Does this bridge the gap in understanding, bridge the gap in communication between the lives of those whom we cannot even fathom and our own? I think such comparisons and such overt anger and disgust with billionaires and the wealthy is merely reinforcing the divide and the boundaries between us. Divides and boundaries which I would hope we really want to undermine in order to get to the root of creating a better world for as many people as possible. And I think in doing that, we need to take responsibility for our words and our actions. All of us, not just the rich, but also the poor. And I think this taking of responsibility is very important to consider in relation to the risk-taking of OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush.
I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General MacArthur said, "You're remembered for the rules you break." And I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did. It's picking the rules that you break that are the ones that will add value to others and add value to society. Yes, I mean, when I started the business, one of the things you'll find, there are other sub-operators out there, but they typically have gentlemen who are ex-military submariners, and you'll see a whole bunch of 50-year-old white guys. I wanted our team to be younger, to be inspirational, and I'm not going to inspire a 16-year-old to go pursue marine technology, but a 25-year-old, who's a sub-pilot or a platform operator, or one of our techs, can be inspirational. And so we've really tried to get very intelligent, motivated, younger individuals involved, because we're doing things that are completely new. We're taking approaches that are used largely in the aerospace industry, is related to safety and some of the preponderance of checklists, things we do for risk assessments and things like that are more aviation related than ocean related. And we can train people to do that. We can train someone to pilot the sub. We use a game controller. So anybody can drive the sub. And we also want our team to have a variety of different background. You're going to go to the Titanic, you're going to be spending 8 days on a boat. You don't want every person to have the same experience of having been on a U.S. nuclear sub or worked for Atlanta submarines, and they all have the same background. We've got one guy who threw the hammer as a varsity athlete. We have one gentleman who's done everything. He goes and surfs in Iceland in the winter. But really get people who have a diverse background, and then train them and train so that it does come off as a polished and safe operation. But really looking beyond that experience in the sub, and what's the time on the boat going to be like with these people, and that makes for a great team. We're selling to our clients a really enjoyable, participatory environment, and that means everybody in our team and our company needs to be an engaging, kind, fun, but highly competent individual.
You believe the Cyclops 2 is pretty much invulnerable.
By the time we're done testing it, I believe it's pretty much invulnerable.
And that's pretty much what they said about the Titanic.
That's right. and I will go on all the first dives, put my money where my mouth is.
The submersible mission set off from Newfoundland, Canada. Each passenger had to pay a total of $250,000 to secure their front row seat on the 5-person maximum capacity OceanGate submersible called Titan that went missing on Sunday. Now, it reportedly took 8 hours for authorities to respond after contact had been lost with the submersible. As of the time of recording, the submersible has approximately 10 hours worth of oxygen left. However, the oxygen levels were an untested estimate, which really has to do with a lot regarding this vessel. The submersible is about the size of a minivan. There is no seating, there is not enough room to stand fully, and there is a sort of improvised toilet hidden by a black curtain. All the passengers are also barefoot.
Let's take a look at Titan. So we're coming into the sub. This is the only toilet available on a deep diving submersible. Best seat in the house. You can look out the viewport. We put a privacy screen in, turn up the music, and it's very popular. We have our control screen here, our sonar screen here, and we can put any image we want in the back. We've taken a completely new approach to the sub design, and it's all run with this game controller and these touch screens. So if you want to go forward, you press forward. If you want to go back, you go back. Turn left, turn right, go down, go up. And it's Bluetooth, so I can hand it to anybody. And it's meant for a 16-year-old to throw it around, and super durable. We keep a couple of spares on board just in case. This is the second year we've been out to the Titanic. We went out in 5 8-day missions. We did about 10 dives to the wreck site of the Titanic, and we did an extra dive on an undiscovered reef that we found.
Rescue missions have, in the last few hours, been relocated after picking up on abnormal banging sounds, quoted as being underwater noise. But so far, findings have been described as negative. David Marquet, a retired US Navy submarine captain, has said that the likelihood of survival or rescue is below 1%. And I think this honesty is very important. Unfortunately, I would say, this is purely my opinion, the media has been making a spectacle out of this whole ordeal, trying to create, I would say, a sense of false hope in order to just keep the live feeds going, to keep interest on their pages, to keep eyes on them. Papers have been speaking to so-called experts who have been relaying how they expertly imagine that these individuals are coping in this situation, which is just absurd and very insensitive and just a complete waste of time.
So in terms of the emotional breakdown or collapse, I'm used to looking at astronauts, and of course they have months in space, whereas this mission is just days. So everything is very compressed emotionally. Now this could be happening already because they will know, and the commanders will know, that the oxygen is running very low. It could happen quickly, but hopefully with the right leadership and right guidance from the pilot and the commander, they will be maintaining their calm. So in terms of the emotions afterwards upon rescue, one would not expect them to recover quickly. So, but I mean, of course, I hope that they do. So in terms of what the family and friends will be going through, they will be going through extreme anxiety. And in some ways it is worse for them because there is absolutely nothing they can do.
I would say that this idea that the media's fixation on this is a matter of genuine care and a matter of genuine coverage actually doesn't pay well enough attention to the fact that these billionaires are basically just being turned into spectacles, into media content for these media conglomerates and outlets. The only people who seem to really be invested in informing the public accurately about this are some renowned experts and individuals who actually are being very reasonable and realistic about the situation.
Michael, you've said that more people have been to outer space than have gone this deep into the ocean. If anything goes wrong this deep, you're on your own.
Yeah, there's absolutely no recovery system that's set up for this depth of the ocean, which is, why we take so many precautions. We cross our T's, we dot our I's, and, we run so many different what-if scenarios so that we have answers in case something does come up, that we can actually correct the situation while we're dealing with it, so that we're actually proactive and handling it and not being reactive. And, this is an experimental submersible. And I think, it's wonderful pushing the limits and the boundaries and, trying to move technology forward. But there are still just certain things I believe you need to do before you put yourself and other people's lives, in possible risk and peril.
At this point, my faith is primarily in these individuals having as painless an ending as is possible. And my condolences just go out to their family, their loved ones, and to everybody associated directly with them. I cannot imagine what it is like to go through this. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. And I am at least relieved that they are not seeing and are not able to see what many very heartless and callous individuals are saying about them online, based purely on the fact that they are billionaires. There are definitely very important conversations to be had, very important reckonings to be had with risk-taking, with private investment, with private companies offering an opportunity of a lifetime to very gullible individuals, to very impressionable, wealthy individuals. And this idea of essentially trying to play some kind of god, which is, I believe, what Stockton Rush was trying in his own, I think, very endearing way of doing. My impression of watching news coverage of Stockton Rush is that he was indeed an explorer. He was an experimental engineer. He sort of reminds me of a young child who is just way too intelligent for their own good, gets into all kinds of trouble, is just ready for the next adventure, believes that they are unstoppable, that they are invincible, and that the world is their oyster. That personality, as I said, is incredibly endearing, it's incredibly encouraging, it's optimistic, but I think there needs to be a line drawn between that being your personality, that being your venture, and dragging, essentially, 4 other individuals into your vision, into your idea of your own invincibility, without full knowledge of the risk, without full knowledge of what they were getting themselves into, and simultaneously taking $250,000 from all of them.
Yeah, it seems like these guys were sort of infused with the innovative entrepreneurial spirit. They wanted to build something that could take people down, take researchers down to the Titanic for research, and they were funding it by getting these wealthy people to buy expensive $250,000 tickets on it.
You steer the ship with a controller, with a joystick from a gaming system, a home gaming system. And that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing, that how very simple this submarine is and how easy it is to navigate.
And in doing so, sometimes we push the bounds and the innovation gets ahead of where the regulations are. And I think the sense I get from that document and from statements by the company is that they were sort of proud of this innovative spirit. And if you're just writing tech code, then you can just throw things out there and you test it and you have this very quick iteration cycle, and that's part of the culture. But when you're putting people down at 13,000 feet, the laws of Mother Nature are going to take over. So I think they might have gone a little too far. I admire the spirit, but we know from years of safe submarining what it takes to all the discipline, the rigor, the operational testing, the operational risk mitigation that you have to do to maintain submarines safe.
It's tragic, and I deeply feel for the families and the kids of these men. But I have to say, it comes with the life of a risk taker.
I think what is most unforgivable is the allowing of a 19-year-old child to get into this experimental submersible. How that was allowed and what this poor child is going through or has gone through, I can't even put into words. It's honest, it's just terrible. And I feel the same way, the same sort of speechlessness when I read about migrant children whose parents have put their lives into the hands of incredibly just gluttonous, horrible, inhumane smugglers. I can't imagine, and I cannot believe that people would do this. I can't believe that people would allow this to happen, even in desperate situations. It breaks my heart that really the world has put many people into such desperate decision-making situations, or that it has given them so much money and so much optimism that they would gladly put a 19-year-old into such a situation.
An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button, that's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
The Titan is the only 5-person sub in the world that can reach Titanic depths, 2.4 miles below the sea. It's also the only one with a toilet, sort of.
And yet I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
Now, back in 2018, this OceanGate submersible called Titan was involved in a lawsuit which is only recently coming to light. The New Republic was the first to obtain records and information detailing this lawsuit involving a former employee of OceanGate called David Lockridge. Lockridge is a submersible captain. After raising these concerns, he was then fired, and then a lawsuit commenced, which was eventually settled privately. Lockridge's job was, and I quote, responsible for the safety of all crew and clients. What basically happened is that Lockridge refused to give the go-ahead to manned tests of earlier submersible models, basically those which preceded Titan. Lockridge was fired, and then OceanGate sued him for disclosing confidential information about the Titan submersible. In response, Lockridge filed a compulsory counterclaim where he alleged wrongful termination over being a whistleblower about the quality. Concerns were raised by submersible pilots and by employees working at OceanGate in 2018, and a letter has been released written to Stockton Rush. I'm going to read the whole letter because I think it is very important. Dear Stockton, this letter is sent on behalf of our industry members who have collectively expressed unanimous concern regarding the development of Titan and the planned Titanic expedition. Our apprehension is that the current experimental approach adopted by OceanGate could result in negative outcomes, from minor to catastrophic, that would have serious consequences for everyone in the industry. The MUV industry has earned itself an enviable safety track record over the past 40 years. This is partly due to the diligent engineering discipline and professional approach exercised by members of the industry, but also due to the collective observation of and adherence to a variety of safety standards. This reputation is solid because it was hard won over many years of diligent application and has resulted in a safe and successful record of operation. Our members are all aware of how important and precious this standing is, and deeply concerned that a single negative event could undo this. Your marketing material advertises that the Titan design will meet or exceed the DNV GL safety standards, yet it does not appear that OceanGate has the intention of following DNV GL class rules. Your representation is, at minimum, misleading to the public and breaches an industry-wide professional code of conduct we all endure to uphold. We do all agree that a performance-based testing program for design verification is a recognized and valid approach to new technologies. However, we recommend that at minimum you institute a prototype testing program that is reviewed and witnessed by DNV GL or ABS. While this may demand additional time and expense, it is our unanimous view that this validation process by a third party is a critical component in the safeguards that protect all submersible occupants. Together, we are all beneficiaries of the excellent safety record of MUV operations over the years, but each one of us is also a steward with a responsibility to sustain this achievement. We would be grateful if you could confirm that OceanGate can see the future benefit of its investment in adhering to our industry accepted safety guidelines and protocols protocols for ultimate success and that of the MUV community. Sincerely yours, Marine Technology Society. This is truly the end of OceanGate, and I think that that is the way that it must definitely go. There's one thing in being an explorer and an adventurer, as are at least 3 of the individuals on board. They are members of the Exploration Society and are very much risk takers in their own right. But it's a completely other thing to bring a child on board. OceanGate's only official media brief and statement has been that they are exploring and mobilizing all options to bring the crew back safely. Their entire focus is on the crew members in the submersible and their families, that they are deeply thankful for the extensive assistance that they have been receiving from several government agencies and deep sea companies in their efforts to re-establish contact with the submersible, and that they are working toward the safe return of the crew members.
David Mearns is here, rescue expert, friends of 2 of those on board, and you're getting some news. You're hearing some news.
There's a WhatsApp group between ourselves and the Explorers Club that we've all been connected to as soon as this happened, and our president is directly connected to the ships that are out there, and the message that they're telling me, if you're talking about debris, it was a landing frame and a rear cover from the submersible. So again, this is a very unconventional submarine. That rear cover is that pointy end of it.
Yeah.
And the landing frame is this little frame that it seems to sit on, and that's how it gets docked into the landing bit.
Right.
So that confirms it's the submersible.
This is definitely going to be a very difficult reckoning for the oceanography community, for the submarine and submersible communities. And I think also, based on what I've at least seen online, is going to be a reckoning for all of us insofar as how we communicate with one another, how we empathize with one another, how different classes empathize and understand one another. Not caring about 750 migrants at sea until there is a comparison to be made is, I think, testament to a bit of an issue that we have. Not to care about 5 men, 5 fathers, 5 uncles, 5 brothers, 5 husbands, lovers, friends, individuals because of their wealth is also something that we need to reckon with insofar as our humanity is concerned. We cannot lose touch with that thing which binds us all together, which is our humanity, which is the fact that we all have hearts that beat, that we all fart, that we all laugh, we all cry, we all make mistakes, we are all incredibly flawed and rather horrible most of the time. And I think it is in these times when the fragility of the human condition is so evident, when death and mortality is right in our grasp, that we need to cling on to our humanity at all costs. My sincere condolences to the families of these individuals, not just these 5 individuals, but the families and loved ones of the people who also lost their lives at sea last week. We have been experiencing in the last fortnight true human tragedy, and it is terrible and heartbreaking. Please do leave your thoughts in the comment sections. I implore you to please be respectful. I will try my very best to read all of your comments because I will not be tolerating any kind of dehumanization of any individuals involved in this situation and in any situation that is being compared to it. I thank you for your understanding and I appreciate all of you greatly. Go well, be safe, and I will see you very soon in the next one.